And now, it's time for another Dice Tower review with Tom Vasel.
Hey folks, today we're taking a look at the game called Aeon's End. And I didn't really know what to think about this game when it showed up because I really didn't know anything about it. I will say that the artwork of the game is fine, but for some reason the artwork made me think of some sort of 80s or early 90s style game. It's from Indie Boards and Cards, and it's a pretty big game. They don't normally make games like this. It's actually a cooperative fantasy deck builder, which is not a new concept, but I was told it was something unique and different, so I went in with no expectations. Let's see how it came out. Now in this game, you are fighting one major bad guy. So here's one that Rageborn, you might be fighting Rageborn. The game also comes with three other nasty bad guys, Crooked Mask, the Prince of Gluttons. And each of these bad guys has a certain number of hit points that you have to take out, 60 or 70. They have some special abilities and some rules that come into play. And they're going to come with their own specialized deck. You're going to have a deck that's made up of some basic cards that come into play that are in all the different bad guys' decks, but there's also specific ones that match that character. So you'll build the deck gets harder as time goes by, and you have it there. You also have a town. This is a hit point tracker. To keep track of the town's hit point, the bad guy is going to be trying to blow up the town, and if he does so, then he wins, while he has hit points and you are trying to reduce his hit points to 0. This Rageborn actually comes with an extra deck too. Some cards are placed out in the middle, then each player is going to take a hero character. So each of the hero characters has special abilities. They have different starting hands and starting decks and different artwork on them. So let's say, for example, I'm going to start with, I'll start with here, Brahma. All right, so Brahma here has a special ability where she can give someone else 4 life when she's set up here. She's a starting hand and a starting deck. So I'll find those specific cards. So she starts with a buried light and 4 crystals. So here's my starting hand. You put that right in your hand, and then your starting deck you will put there, and you will have over here as your deck of cards. Now, who goes first in this game? There's a turn order deck. So once everyone's set up and ready to go, they have their starting hand and their starting deck, you're going to shuffle this for each round of the game. And there's going to be cards in here for each player and also some cards for the bad guy, the nemesis. And so you'll be shuffling these, and then each turn you'll draw it. Okay, player 3 goes, and then now the nemesis goes, and then player 1. So on a nemesis's turn, if they have any cards that are out, those cards are going to activate. Otherwise, they were going to draw the top card here. So this one, for example, says Unleash. And I look here on the character, and it says when he unleashes, he gets a Fury token. And this guy, when he gets 4 Fury tokens, is going to attack the town. And then Gravehold, that's the name of the town, suffers 3 damage. So that one just did 3 damage to the town. This one here is a card that's going to stay out. I'm going to put 2 power tokens on this card. And then at the end of each, whenever the nemesis is activated, any player is going to take 4 damage, and it's going to cause an unleash. And then we take one of these tokens off. When the second one goes off, this card goes away. However, when this card shows up, you can see that players can discard 3 cards to get rid of it. So they have to decide whether they're going to do that right away. And so there's all sorts of cards in here. There can even be minions for the bad guy who will show up. And whenever the bad guy is activated, the nemesis is activated, these guys will do things. So for example, this one, he'll do damage equal to the number of Fury tokens that the Rageborn has. And it takes 5 hit points to take this guy out. So there's some cards that just do straight up things. There are cards that bring out more minions, and then there are cards that are going to be those power cards that are going to be annoying to players. Now on a player's turn, they're going to be playing cards from their hand, and many of the cards they're going to be playing from their hand are simply going to give them a currency that they're going to be able to use to buy other cards. Cards have costs on them. This one here is a starting deck one, so cost is free. But there are other cards that they're going to be able to get into their hand. And so they'll have cards that are going to give better amounts of money. So for example, and these cards here are going to change each game. This one here gives you 3 of the money. And then you can discard a card. And if you do, an ally draws a card. This one gives you 3. And if it's the first one you played this turn, an ally gets a charge. This one gives 2. And you can get an extra one that can only be used to gain a spell. And then I have relics that will do different things. And then you have spells. And so players are going to be using this money to buy cards. They can also charge They can, for every 2 that they spend, they can add a charge counter here. And when this thing is completely filled up, they're going to be able to remove all these charges and do their special ability. In this case, he can give a player 4 life. Now, players are going to start with a certain number of life, and if your life is gone, you are defeated. You can still do a few things, but it's kind of a pain in the neck. If all the players are defeated, the game will end. Also, if Gravehold is destroyed. And then you'll notice that there's some breaches here. Each player has 1 open breach and 3 closed breaches. And so a player can cast spells on their turn, or they can ready spells, and they can only ready spell in an open breach. At the beginning of their next turn, they will cast these spells. So this one here does 1 damage and gives me some money that I can spend. So I could put this in this open breach, but the more spells you have, the more breaches you're going to want to have. You can open a breach by simply paying the cost here to open it. So this one costs 4, and I flip it over and it's open. Or I might not want to do that. I might want to make it cheaper, and so this one says 3 focus, so I pay 3 focus and I rotate it. That's going to make it cheaper to open in the future, but also whenever I focus, I can put a spell on for this turn, although I'm forced to cast it next turn. And some of these, when you open them, are going to do extra damage to the spells that are in them, so that's a kind of a bonus for getting these breaches open. And if you get all your breaches open, you'll have more spells. So the different actions that you'll be taking on your turn are you'll be buying different cards, you'll be loading up spells. I mean, your initial spells are going to do 1 damage, but as time goes by, maybe you'll get this spell that does 3 damage and 2 extra damage for each prep spell in an adjacent breach. Or this one here, when this one's prepped once per turn during your main phase, you may return a gem that you played to your hand, and then when this one's cast, it does 4 damage. So you can ready some spells, you can focus or open breaches, you can gain cards or charges here, you can play cards or do things, and you can resolve some cards that you might have in front of you. And then that's pretty much it on your turn, and you'll go to the next person. And that's the game. Now, when you buy new cards, they're going to go into your discard pile, and your discard pile, you can put the cards there as you discard them in any order you want, and then you'll be drawing an entire new hand of 5 cards next turn. If you need to draw cards and your deck is gone, you'll take your discard pile and simply flip it over. There's no shuffling involved, so you can kind of set when cards are going to come into your hand. And you're going to keep going through these cards. Of course, the bad guy is going to keep going through his cards too, and they're going to get worse and worse until the bottom when these gigantic minions are going to come out, or this one here where he will strike twice or unleash twice, and players will discard cards equal to the number of tokens he has. And this is just Rageborn. Like I said, each of them has some kind of different things that they'll have, and there are ways to make the game harder or easier with each of the minions. And there are different cards that you can put over here. You will always have 3 gems and 2 relics and 4 spells, but they each do different things. Like, for example, this one gives you 1 charge, and then you pick one of your allies, and they also get a charge. While this one here, I can cast a prep spell that I did this turn, and it will do 2 extra damage. So there's all sorts of these, and these will change from game to game. So the variety here, you'll have a different bad guy, you'll have a different set of cards, and then you'll have different groups of heroes. And either you will defeat the bad guy together, or you will all lose. The biggest negative I have with this game is really the graphic design. I don't know how to explain it, but the cards just don't pop. They just have this kind of... I mean, the artwork is okay. And I don't think the artwork is great, really. But the cards themselves just look like they're rejects from a 90s CCG that just did not work well. And the whole thing on the table just doesn't look like... People don't stop by and go, wow, what are you playing? They just don't. It's not that it's bad. It's just... a great graphic designer could have, I think, really made this game just pop. And that is probably my biggest problem with the game, is that. And also the monsters, while they're unique, I guess, they feel generic in how they look. Not necessarily how they act, but how they look. Now, and the characters too. The characters themselves, like you can see here the different characters, they look different, right? But other than this guy with those molten hands, they don't really seem to have any kind of major differentiation things. Yeah, the pictures in the back are kind of cool, and they got some neat backstories, I guess. But I don't know. You have to kind of work to get the theme of this game. It doesn't jump out at you. All right, that's it for negative. Other than that, The biggest thing about this game that I thought was amazing, and every game should do it, this game was the easiest game to learn I've done in the longest time. This is a deck builder with a lot of cards and a lot of bad guys and all kinds of stuff. But this game came with a sheet that said, stop. Before you open everything, do this. Open this deck. Put this deck here. Put this deck here. Take this deck in your hand. Put this deck in order. The cards are already set up for you. I just had to open everything up. And we walked through our first game, and it was like, this is how you play. Now go. Wow. And then when I went to the full rules, I was like, oh, okay. This is how you build the Nemesis deck. This is what the cards that you put out. But that first game, and with the pre-built decks in the box, other companies take note. That is how you teach a new game, especially one that seems as complex as this one. Now, it's not complex. And in fact, there's really not anything new about this. Oh, your deck is not shuffled, although I'll tell you, it's the hardest thing not to shuffle it. When I was picking my deck up, I almost always was getting ready to automatically shuffle. But not shuffling a deck has been done in City of Iron. This game had, variable player turn order. Well, we've seen that before. And in fact, the entire game feels like a fantasy version of Sentinels of the Multiverse. Sentinels of the Multiverse is a superhero game where there's one main villain, there's a bunch of heroes, and they each have decks of cards, and they're working with those decks of cards, and then they all take their turns. The bad guy takes his turn, and he has minions show up. I mean, it's very similar in a lot of aspects. That's not a knock against this game, because Sentinels of the Multiverse is a very, very fun game, and this has that same feeling. And as this game progressed, I was like, wow, what this game does well is it promotes teamwork. There's a lot of cards that are helping an ally out. This helps. Most of your special powers are almost always, here's something to do, give an ally some more cards, heal an ally. And I like that. That's good. It helps you work together. You can't plan perfectly because, first of all, you don't know what cards are going to show up in the Nemesis deck, but you also don't know the turn order of any given turn, and sometimes the turn order will just mess you over. At the beginning, you're like, what is wrong with this game? I'm peppering this. Ooh, look, we did a damage. Then two more. And look, we did 6 damage to the guy who has 70 hit points. Meanwhile, he's going to our city. So it feels like that, but as time goes by, you're like, oh, my spells are getting bigger and bigger. Of course, he's getting bigger and badder. And do we waste precious spells on one of these minions, or do we just go for the throat on the big bad guy? Good decisions to make. The game is hard, but not impossible to win. And again, you can switch out the bad guys, switch out the heroes, switch out the decks of cards, make the game easier or difficult. So there's a whole lot of things. And then there's also, they come with different packs for this. So this is, for example, the Nameless pack. And this is an expansion. It has 2 new Nemesis. Nemesises? I'm not sure how to say that. A new hero and then more cards. So this is more stuff for the game, but I'm not saying this is a game that needs more stuff. There is a lot in the box itself. You don't need to get into these expansions. I think you'll be perfectly content with this for a while. So if you wanted a fantasy Sentinels for the Multiverse, boom, you got what you want. If you like deck building cooperative style, this is really good in that thing. If you just like cooperative games where teamwork is a big plus, you'll like this game. But I think some people are going to pass it by because it looks very generic. And even almost has a generic thematic feel to it. But if you can get past that, the game underneath it is a pretty strong, solid game, and I was very pleasantly surprised with it. That's Aeon's End. Dice Tower Judgment, excellent.
Thanks so much for watching the Dice Tower videos. Find more great videos and reviews, as well as our top-rated audio podcast at Dicetower.com. You can also find other great shows at Dicetowernetwork.com. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower. The Dice Tower is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can find great games for great prices. Cool stuff in stock. Check them out at CoolStuffInc.com.
Shut the door.